Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going?
Hello, and welcome to Just Breathe, a podcast about Unitarian Universalist religious education and faith formation for anyone curious to learn more about Unitarian Universalism. I am Ember Oak Kelly. I prefer she and her pronouns, but I am open to any pronouns. Since our podcast is also available in video format on YouTube, we practice inclusivity by sharing a visual description. I am a white trans woman with glasses and shoulder-length brown graying hair that reads as blonde on Zoom sometimes. And I am wearing glasses as well as a burgundy dress. I have a black and gold gradient background that also features the Just Breathe Season 5 logo in the corner. And in this episode, I am so excited to be joined by Erin Walter and Justin Almeida to explore the Healing Springs, this place where we go to fortify and do self and communal spiritual care. Erin and Justin, so our listeners can get to know you a little better, could you tell us who you are, your pronouns, a visual description, and your relationship with Unitarian Universalism or any positions you might hold? And Erin, do you want to kick us off?
Hey y'all, I'm Reverend Erin Walter. I use she, her pronouns. I have on a sort of what I call my rainbow butterfly poncho, but a black multicolored poncho. I'm white. I have reddish hair. I am joyfully middle-aged. My background is bluebonnets, the state flower of Texas, where I live. I'm here in Austin, coming to you from the band house where my band, Parker Woodland, is working on our next album today. And so I'm taking a musical break to do this. But I am a lifelong Unitarian Universalist and have been a UU minister for about 12 years. And I am proud to serve as the minister and executive director of the Texas UU Justice Ministry. That's the state justice network for UUs in Texas. I'm also affiliated with the Church of the Larger Fellowship, and I'm just so happy to be here and also to get to know both of you. So I'll turn it over to Reverend Justin.
Thank you, Erin. And my name is Justin. I use he, they pronouns. I am a indigenous mestize, slightly darker than pale skin, black rimmed glasses, and a black and gray t-shirt with a background of a spiral stained glass church ceiling. Bald head, some piercings of turquoise in my ears and industrial piercings. And I live and reside on the unceded land of the Coast Salish and Duwamish peoples, otherwise known as Seattle, Washington, where I am an ordained and endorsed Unitarian Universalist minister and chaplain affiliated with University Unitarian Church and serving Swedish Medical Center as a chaplain to Neuroscience and Neurology Institute.
It is so great to have you both here, and I am so excited about this conversation. This is going to be a real great chance to get to know both of you deeper over some fun topics. And this season, we have been guided by the framework of the community building map of Deeper Joy, as well as whole church religious education. We have episode links in the podcast description if you'd like to dive deeper into those topics or understand a little bit more of what those are about. In our last episode, we were at the Stretching River, where we grew through challenge and being outside of our comfort zone. And now we're headed into the Healing Springs, where we can take a pause, tend to what's maybe been stirred up in all of that stretching river, and reconnect to what sustains us. The springs have many pools, some for individual healing, some for collective repair, and others that even overflow into the wider world, maybe through some justice ministry. And at the source of all of this is connection to ourselves, to one another, to the earth, to our values, and to something larger than us. And this connection requires something that we don't always make space for, and that is rest. So, having established a little bit about the Healing Springs, I'd like to get to know our guest a little bit better. So, when you think about healing in community, what is a moment where you felt genuinely restored or reconnected in community, and what helped make that moment feel possible?
So, as a hospital chaplain, I work at the hospital on Sundays, and so I don't necessarily get a lot of time in the congregation. When I do, at University Unitarian Church, we do this beautiful doxology that begins every service. And, especially in UU spaces, there's not many places where the whole community does spoken word and song outside of the hymns. And so there's something about the doxology that we sing together at the beginning of the service that when I first stepped foot in University Unitarian back in 2012, that was the first piece of the experience that broke me open. And it continues like all I need to do is just be in that space, participate in the doxology, and it's just like it feels like home. And that is just all of a sudden like instant reconnection. And I really believe that that is because it's a solidarity of the whole community stating our intent for the worship and our values as a community, and it's absolutely beautiful, and that's what kind of evokes that sense of healing, especially if I haven't been in the congregation for a while.
Well, Justin, what you said reminded me of something when you mentioned being in the hospital setting. So what I'm going to share is a through line of how Prince, the artist, the musician, has brought a sense of community and healing for me, sort of across the areas of my work. So just a week or so ago here in Austin, we had this big Prince tribute show where artists from singers like myself, I'm the singer and the bass player in my band, and of course we sing a lot in church and in justice work. But we had about 15 different artists doing different Prince songs in this very special venue. That's Austin is a music city, and so this very special place. And they asked me to give a spiritual word to start, and then do "Let's Go Crazy." Do you all know that song where it starts with "Dearly beloved, we are gathered"? So there's something that's so healing to me about music and community, that where it brings people together. It was a very diverse group of musicians, the crowd, everything. So it was really, really special. And I draw the Prince thread throughout my ministry. When I was training to be a chaplain in Oakland, California at Alta Bates, there was a patient who wanted to sing Purple Rain during one of their hardest moments. And so to get to have that moment together, and then, we do Prince theology services and some of the services here in Austin that I've served with my friend and colleague, Simone Monique Barnes, and some of the musicians. So there's something that lights up and heals for me when I see Unitarian Universalism, which I did not grow up with, having things like Prince in it. Like the Unitarian Universalism I grew up with 40 years ago still saw, music of the 60s as fresh and new, which, I love that music. And granted, Prince isn't making music today either, but I'm just saying, like, whenever Unitarian Universalism finds a way to be woven into communities in new and vibrant ways, that feels so life-giving to me and so healing, because I want a Unitarian Universalism that grows and evolves and is in touch with what the wider community is seeking. So anyway, that came up for me as you were talking about your experiences. But there are so many. Like, healing in community is what we do, right? Like, that's where so much healing is. So thank you for that question.
Oh, I love having music show up for both of you. That's fascinating, and it has me like reflecting on. I know there's been many artists and many songs that have definitely been, when it really gets to that level where it's something that's deeper than just like some head knowledge. Like, music can really get to those deeper places so easily, and I think that's really really a gift, and definitely can be a real healing tool. Pivoting a little bit for our second introductory question, in the imaginative spirit of the Journeys of Deeper Joy role-playing game curriculum, we're going to have a little role-playing moment as we dive into this topic. So let's imagine that we've just arrived at Healing Springs after a long journey on the stretching river. There are many different pools, each offering a different kind of care. So, what pool is calling to you right now? What maybe there's a song coming from the pool that's calling you right now? And what kind of healing or restoration does it offer? Or maybe that could be for you, that could be for like a group that you're with, that could be the world. So what healing pool calls to you? And I'll let you be as creative or as literal as you like with this.
I mean, along with the, that theme of music, right? I forget who coined the phrase, but there's this idea that creating music, singing music, playing music is like praying twice. And it is this sense that through the arts, we access, not only, our rational thinking, but we access, the deep empathetic and emotional and spiritual experience that exists in all of us. And so, that pull of music, gosh, I mean, it's transformative, right? And in the hospital, often it is music that can bring perhaps one of the most amazing healing. I mean, we have medicine, we have our technology, we have compassionate care. Uh, and yet, when I implement music in my chaplaincy, it has a way of transforming people. I remember this one patient a young person, I say young person, they were in their 30s, and unfortunately was looking at the end of their life, and they had lost the ability mostly to communicate. However, they were able to nod yes and shake their head no, and they had requested Taylor Swift, and so in the room, there's a couple friends there in the room too. We turned on Taylor Swift, right, on one of our phones and began to play the songs that this patient had requested. And they began to dance, in the capacity that they were able. And yet, for a situation that was incredibly just sad and heartbreaking and painful, all of that seemed to melt away as we all started dancing to Taylor Swift. And so when I think of like that healing and restoration, drawing from that pool of music, I mean, it's miraculous. In my line of work, we would call it miraculous. And so I really feel, yeah, drawn to the pool of music right now.
Thank you for taking me to that pool. I was almost crying listening to you talk about it. It's so beautiful. Part of my ministry is dance. I'm not sure how many UU Zumba teacher ministers there have been, but I'm one of them, however many of us there are. And so I've really enjoyed incorporating dance. We danced into the sanctuary in my ordination, and we've just done a lot of dancing, and I love it so much. But for that pool of music, what you had me thinking about is also last week was a busy week. I was out at a ranch doing a retreat with the Kairos Center called Songs in the Key of Resistance. So they brought together about 100 song leaders from all over the country to learn new songs, and I'm still processing just the incredible music and the leadership of particularly young people of color around the country, because they really prioritize bringing young folks. And what they did that stays on my heart in particular was when people would share, they would sing back after you shared something, and what we would sing is, we see you, we love you, we're here with you. We see you, we love you, we're here with you. Just a few times, and everybody would just acknowledge that person and what they were sharing. And so I was imagining, even before you were sharing, just in this pool that reflects back who you are, and where people really feel seen and witnessed, and somehow the waters sing back to you. We see you, we love you, we're here with you. And while I was there, I was kind of crying to some folks at my breakfast table about a family member of mine who's in the hospital and wasn't expecting to choke up the way I did. And then they just said, can we sing to you? And they sang that just around the breakfast table. So yeah, I share that with folks. Like, I think it's important to find a healing song that you can reflect back like those healing waters to yourself or to your friends anytime you can.
Oh, you two are gonna have me in my musical side here. In this one, this is some beautiful sharing already here, folks. Some beautiful sharing. I really appreciate these really deeply insightful introduction. So let's pivot us to our more general questions. I think I could talk about music for the rest of our remaining time recording together, but I've got some questions that probably will also bring up music again. But to think um, about these healing springs and about how healing works in our congregations and our communities and wider Unitarian Universalism. The healing isn't just for moments of crisis. We need this healing through lots of other phases of our lives. We need to have that ability to be grounded and resilient and connected at all times of our relationship with our communities. It's great to have in the moments, but you're also able to have those powerful musical moments because the music has also connected with you in the more general times of life too. And so I'm curious, and we'll dive in with our first question here is, what are some healing practices that have been important in your life and your work? I've heard named obviously music and dancing as both great ones here, and we could dive deeper into those, but I'd also love to hear if there's other things that have really resonated as well.
Since Justin has kindly gone first these first couple times, I don't know if you all heard, there was a big hailstorm where I am, and so I was answering questions when the hail would die down. But I guess maybe that brings me to one of my healing things is just time in nature, fresh air, going for walks with my dog, or going for walks right now, like with my family members in the hospital. Those of us who are visiting try to get the one person who's been sleeping at the hospital with this person for 3 weeks, let's go for a walk every morning and get some fresh air. Let's eat our lunch on the hospital patio so that we get some fresh air. And actually that reminds me of, again, when I was in hospital chaplaincy, one of my mentors said, I like to park at the top of the hospital parking garage. So no matter if there are parking spots sooner, park at the top so you can look out and see the whole world and know that it's more than just, whatever grief you might be holding with folks. And so I think about that too, since I'm in justice work, trying to remember to look out at all the beauty of the world, even when it feels like there's this narrow view of all the struggles. Poetry, there's so many. We need all of it. I guess I would be remiss if I didn't say one more before I muted myself, but that oftentimes when I find that I'm struggling, I also realize that reaching out to other people is nourishing for me. So whether that's going online and naming what I'm struggling with so that my community can chime in and just bear witness or make suggestions, that I feel nourished by that, or if it's actually making phone calls and calling friends and telling them like I'm struggling, or that connection, getting outside of just what I can do alone, into community or into nature. I know that was a long list. My work is hard. I'm also a mom. I need a lot of coping mechanisms, y'all.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. All of that, right? I have a walking meditation practice based off of the Thich Nhat Hanh Plum Village model. The Pacific Northwest is a wonderful place just to go outside. It doesn't matter if it's raining or whatever. I think, in addition to all of that, one of the healing practices that is really, really important to me, and this comes out of kind of my indigenous mestizo family and background, is the healing practice of food. Bringing together, cooking together, creating flavors, finding new and exciting combinations, and gathering people together just to eat, just to drink. at the hospital, often if I am working with a caregiver or with a doctor or somebody on staff who has gone through a traumatic event, we'll sit down and have coffee or tea, right? And even if it's just a few minutes without words, it is just that practice of holding the hot cup and taking that sip and smelling the aroma and just sitting, right? Just sitting in that moment and just being thankful for that experience before diving into whatever that is. And around my house, the blessings of food, right? This idea that simple things can be brought together, a little bit of spices, a little bit of different ingredients, and then all of a sudden, and I think in Christian scripture, there's this idea of the miracle of loaves and fishes, but the miracle wasn't necessarily that, a divine presence had suddenly created something out of nothing. It's because everybody brought what they had to the table and there was enough. And I find that for myself, that healing practice of being reminded of abundance through food is, it's one of the ways that I say I love you to my friends and my family, and I love that love being reflected back on me when I get tasty treats given to me.
I'm also a chronic walker. I it is my favorite of coping mechanisms and healing strategies. So, resonating with that was shared. But I'm also, as I'm listening in my most recent time with my spiritual director, at the end of the conversation, she's like, "So Ember, like, what are you doing to find time to rest?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll let you know. I'll keep you posted when I figure that out." So I feel like even more than normal, I'm used to on this podcast getting to hear these like amazingly profound thoughts, and I have to turn to the next question, but I'm hearing these and I'm just like, okay, maybe I do need some rest in my life. Maybe my spiritual director was correct, because everything you're saying is just resonating deeply with, I think, some deep stuff for me of like, yeah, it's really important to take this time for rest, for realizing the beauty of the wider world, for calling out into your community to say like, hey, I could use a little support. And like, Erin, when you were naming that, that also resonates. Like having those people that you can uh, speak out to and be like, "Hey, got any thoughts?" I've
Yeah,
learned that I'm an external processor over the years, so it's
right.
extra
Well,
important.
yeah, and to your point about rest, it's like in this day and age with so much technology, people can think that it's like, you just need to like lay in bed and be on your phone and that counts as rest. And I mean, it depends on who you are, but I've been hearing, and it feels true to me, that's not necessarily always the kind of rest you need. And if you really need renewal, and like a renewal of spirit or body, sometimes those things look more like what Justin said, a meal with family, or for me, like actually going out and like doing karaoke can be like a rest, even though it doesn't sound like rest to everyone, but it's like knowing what you need to be renewed. And maybe it is a slowing down and not working, and maybe it's actually putting all the technology away entirely to do something else and move your body or pray or whatever. But anyway, it's not probably not the same for everyone, but it sounds like you've got a good spiritual director there, Ember. That's a good modeling for the rest of us. It's been a minute for me on that.
Yeah. Rest in and of itself, the way that all life on Earth has evolved is all life rests. It doesn't matter. It could be a cell, it could be a plant, it could be an animal, a human being. Everything that lives seems to require periods of inactivity. And, especially in a culture where so much of our worth is built into this idea of production, right? As if we are human doings rather than human beings. To sit back into the being piece. And, I think of for myself, some of the signs of burnout that I get one of the things that is very evident is I get a twitch above my eye. And when that starts showing up, that is a physical tell for my body of like, okay, it's time it's time to maybe not do 2 hours at the gym. Maybe it's time to, not do that extra seminar, for continuing education. Maybe it is just that time to sit and listen to music, to take 10 minutes and drink a cup of tea, to go out and sit in the hammock and just listen to the birds and the squirrels and the chickens in the background. And, yeah, and I love that idea, right? Rest can be singing karaoke. It can be sharing food with one another. It is just this idea of stepping away, at least for me, stepping away from the need to produce into a sense of just a need to be. And that I love drawing from that healing spring of just being, because in many ways, it's countercultural, and it's an act of resistance against a culture that honestly wants to extract us.
Yes, I'm very much an avowed digital minimalist. I think it's actually on my UUA website profile that says Ember passionate about digital minimalism. For a while, I even did the whole like flip phone thing. Right now, I just have a everything removed iPhone because it turned out I occasionally need a smartphone for work. And so I actually find that one of my signs for burnout is when I find myself more drawn to like, oh, like I need to just like go check the news 12 times and I need to like sit on like, oh, I need to watch a lot of YouTube videos in a row instead of maybe just one. Like that's kind of my sign of like when I am feeling that pull towards too much technology in my life that I'm like, ooh, okay, I think maybe I'm looking for I know that my body's looking for that rest, but the dopamine scrolling isn't going to be the rest that I need. That what I need is, yeah, community. What I need is grounding in feeling cared for and caring for myself and doing the things that leave me, feeling really cared. One of the things I've instituted in the last few months has actually been building in. Sometimes I call it meditation time. Sometimes I call it boredom time. It takes a little bit of both forms. Is that I give myself 15 minutes where I'm just like there's no devices nearby. I'm not reading either. I'm not like I'm just sitting and I'm gonna like sit with my thoughts. And it is not always the easiest, folks, but I do recommend maybe giving it a try. Erin, what about you? What are like some signs that you notice for like burnout or overextension in yourself or in your community?
Oh gosh, what you said, I that I'm not usually one to do the doom scrolling and stuff like indiscriminately, but that I have noticed that you're right. Like that is a thing that can be a sign for me. Also, just I tend to be very good about responding to email and like just staying on top of things. And when I find that I'm like reading and not responding, and I'm like I'm putting off responsiveness and getting things done, that's a sign to me, and a sign of needing less technology, like needing a break. It's like, but really, I just took a sabbatical last, yeah, last year, but it was 4 months, and I will say I could have used more. I think it's really sacred that we take time. I struggle to make time for the Sabbath. Part of that for me is because I have what is really a full-time ministry, and then my full-time band, and then like full-time motherhood and household things. And so I feel blessed to have flexible kind of control of my schedule, but to actually have time where I, like, as Justin said, I'm just being, is hard. So I am working on that with everybody else. And I thank you for that suggestion to take 15 minutes to think nothing, because that is when some of the greatest joys of my life, or like paths, have been set in motion. When I had the most sort of banal job as a legal editor for the Texas legislature in my early 20s, where we really did nothing for days on end while we waited for the legislature to give us something to do, and then we would do a ton, right, for a certain period of time. During those downtimes, that's when I identified for myself, oh, it's time for me to join a band. I want to join a band, and that put me on a trajectory of the greatest joys of the rest of my life. But I would not have had that thought if my mind was constantly occupied. And this was pre-social media. So I worry sometimes about where do people find the boredom to spark that idea, you know? So anyway, yeah, thank you for that invitation to do nothing for a little while. I think we all need that.
Just as an aside, I love that, when we do nothing, things bubble up. That's actually one of the reasons why so many ideas come when we're in the shower, right? So it's this idea when we're in the shower, there is the sensory input of the hot water, of the steam. We're not doing anything else, right? We're just there. And yet it has a way of resetting our cognitive state and relaxing the pieces that keep us from creativity. And all of a sudden, yeah, inspiration strikes. And resting in the shower, sauna, shower, take a swim, something like that. Oh my gosh. I'm big. Yeah, water is one of my healing, which is why I love healing springs, right? It makes me think of like hot springs.
Boredom, I think we're identifying, is one of those springs, in the healing springs that you need to sometimes dive in and be bored. And yeah, very, very similar experiences of the shower moments, the downtime moments. Those are when I'm like, oh, wait, I've actually instituted in my work week that at least once a week, I want to try and take I'm calling them like deep thought walks. Credit to Cal Newport, actually, who has a podcast that kind of inspired this idea. But I take a notebook, like I have these little tiny notebooks, and I go with a thought of something that I'm working on for work, and I just go on a walk and I think about that thought. And it's been really great to just sit with like one problem, one thing that's going on, and it helps it feel more sustainable. But I want to pivot us a little bit from like some of our individual habits to thinking about these pools that are also big enough for our communities. And I'm curious, how do you think that communities hold both individual healing needs and sometimes the need for collective repair at the same time? Because that can be complicated, especially if there's like conflict in a congregation or in a communal setting. How do we hold both at the same time?
One of the things that I think is important in a congregational setting, for ministers and for any leaders, is to preach on conflict and normalize the expectation of it, to have talk about conflict and practices for return and repair in our covenants, in our meeting procedures, which sounds, that's so you for me to say that, but we need to build it in, so that people aren't feeling less personally attacked or vulnerable or surprised that a conflict would arise. We're human, a conflict's going to arise. So for instance, I served in interim ministry with First Unitarian Universalist Church of Austin during a particularly tender time where their longtime minister was retiring due to a terminal cancer diagnosis. And we were coming out of the pandemic. So there's so much tenderness and so much potential for conflict to come up. And yet in this predominantly white, coming from white culture church, conflict avoidance was very much, in the practice, so just talking about it. And so that I think is really important. At the Texas UU Justice Ministry, having a collective practice so tonight, and every Thursday night, we have this online action hour. So we have a container where every week we take justice actions together with music and prayer, and just what are the actions that our partners are asking of us this week, and we can come together over Zoom. And so making sure that there are these like spaces that we hold ritually, whether there's a week where only 4 people show up or there's a week where 50 people show up, so that when needs arise, we know where to go. We're not having to reinvent the wheel or create anything from scratch each time. So those are some things that come to mind for me from the parish and from the Justice Network context.
Yeah, what brought to mind is so back in January, I had the privilege to be able to respond to the clergy call in Minneapolis, for the ICE action out there. And there was, over 1,000 people from across multiple denominations and belief systems answering the call for this community that, was definitely affecting individuals, but was a collective healing, right? This community was injured and was looking for others to come in and assist with that healing. And, I think for Unitarian Universalists, we think of this, one of our deeply held values is that we believe in the interconnectedness of all life, right? And so this idea of an injury to one is an injury to everyone. And so when I attend to my individual needs, that is helping heal the collective. And the injury, especially if I think of Minneapolis and ICE, the injury is certainly to individuals, but it is to these cultural, these ethnic, these identities, these intersectional identities that are being targeted, which need to attend not only to themselves. We think of this idea of like trauma-informed ministry, which is understanding the intersectional identity of not just a person, but of a group and providing space for that group to then gather. In Minneapolis, there was opportunity to come together for these intersectional groups while at the same time coming together as a whole group and attending to the collective harm that we're all feeling because of the atrocities being committed out there and across our country. There is something that I have found that when grief and mourning is done together in community, there is something powerful in collective repair that my own self-care practices uh, just are insufficient, but become sufficient when done with others. And, especially in the hospital, we find that when patients have community at the bedside, they heal faster. They spend less days in the hospital. They respond better to medications. There is something about the collective repair that transcends the individual. And I feel that our denomination definitely has that wisdom in the sense that, not only an injury to one is an injury to all, a healing for all includes a healing for one. And I think that's beautiful.
Justin, as you were talking about having the space for the marginalized groups, it made me think of like at the UUA level, we've been hosting the Woodlands, which is like a trans and non-binary support group, and the power of affinity groups and similar things to be spaces where healing is going on, while maybe some broader issues are also being addressed in the wider, that way the trans folks got a space that they can feel cared for, while transphobia is being addressed in both the wider association and in our wider culture. That there's still that space. So that spoke to me when you were talking about that.
Yeah, one of the other things that you made me think about is just what it means to have a shared goal in helping a community stay in the work of transforming conflict and growing and healing when there is a conflict. So, on the very small scale, being in a band, there's three of us in Parker Woodland, and we have conflicts and differences of opinions and perspectives, and we could give up. We could decide not to be in this band together anymore, but then we wouldn't be able to pursue this like deep goal and dream that we have around putting our music forward in the world. And I think the same is true on a much bigger scale when it comes to our faith or justice movements. We need to, yeah, I love that song, Keep Your Eyes on the Prize and Hold On. We're going to use it in Action Hour tonight. But if our goal is beloved community, if our goal in justice work is collective liberation, we truly cannot afford to just take our whatever and leave the table, when a conflict arises. We need to get there together. Kelly Hayes, who's a urban indigenous activist and author friend in Chicago, when she came to talk in our anti-ICE work here in Texas, she was saying, you're going to work with people who do not share all the same values or opinions politically, faith-wise, like really. And you want that because there's not enough people, she said, who look like me or look like you to get this done. Like, we are going to need everyone if we are going to have abolition across the board, not just ICE abolition, but full abolition, like we're all working for in these spheres. And so I think that's just a thing. You see people sometimes give up and leave a church, and, it's not for me to necessarily judge each individual action, but my hope is that more often than not, when people face a conflict at church, they give themselves the opportunity for a healthy transformation that comes when we really look at conflict as an opportunity, and we stay focused on our dream of beloved community, our collective liberation that we've got to stay in it to get to. So it's hard. I'm not gonna lie, it's hard. My bass
So
parts
hard.
are not perfect yet, and I have work to do. Anyway,
I think, one of the key things that I, heard named in what we've just been sharing is, that it's an ongoing thing. And we were talking about that even on like the individual level. What does it look like for communities to prioritize healing, prioritize rest, prioritize cultivating all of these things as ongoing practices versus, you have the systems for repair set up so that when the thing goes wrong, you don't have to invent a new system of repair. And that's I loved the common read a few years back, the On Repentance and Repair. That was a real big one that really meant a lot in my own life journey. And so, yeah, how do we prioritize healing not just after the harm, but as an ongoing practice in our communities?
Yeah, I mean that curriculum on repentance and repair, right? I think of one thing in my ministry that I'm very convinced of is the sense that forgiveness is a spiritual practice, right? It's not just a one-time deal. It's something that when I wake up in the morning, it's something that I have to commit to because those wounds bubble up, right? These wounds, even though they might be scars, can sometimes ache. The same thing with communities. Here in the Pacific Northwest, and introduce myself that I live on the unceded land of the Coast Salish and Duwamish people. We have and so the Duwamish tribe in the Northwest is not federally recognized, right? So they don't get all the benefits that come with tribal recognition. But what they have done is set up a system called real rent, where individuals, communities can donate to the tribe. And in a way of, in many ways, it's like reparations. It's this idea of like this ongoing practice of saying, I'm going to give out of my resources to support a group that has been wounded and continues to be wounded, and yet moves in solidarity with that group of that continual practice of repentance and forgiveness. And I see it in our congregations all the time. At my own church, University Unitarian, we do set up a couple times a year where the community comes together and focuses on, what do we need to collectively heal from, whether within the congregation or within the community, and how do we just hold space for the hurt so that we can move on to the healing. If the hurt isn't addressed, the healing can't happen. And I see that in the hospital all the time, right? If somebody comes in with a broken arm, we have to address the hurt before the healing takes place. And I feel that if we can do that as a denomination, as communities, yeah, it really can, and commit to it over and over and over again.
I'm going to be thinking about that question. Yeah, I really appreciate Justin's answer, and rather than try to access something in my tired brain, I think I'm going to take that question in, and I do think that that is some of the part that healing, forgiveness, repair practices invite us to do is not always pretend we have the answer, but that we would be willing to sit with someone's question or someone's pain, like Justin said. And so I'm going to think about it. Thank you for that question, Ember.
One of the things that's coming up for me in hearing about, like addressing the hurt, what when I wrote the Journeys of Deeper Joy role playing game curriculum, I was trying to come up with scenarios based off things that I know from personal experience, that I've heard others struggle with in real, like, communal settings, that I wanted to create a curriculum that was giving people access to use role playing as a way to, like, interact with things that are serious, actual communal conflicts, but in a more fun way, and like have a way to practice without having to live through it. And one of the Healing Springs sessions is about a mushroom who, being in a group of pilgrims with other mushrooms, has been hurt by the rest of the group, and the rest of the group is trying to basically force this mushroom into healing. So it's a story of healing as the hurt, like that forced healing as a hurt. And really, this Deeper Joy framework reminds us that healing always has to be, centered around the choice and empowerment. It's not, hey, we need to get over this conflict. We need to get over this trauma. We need to get over this hurt. Just get over it. It's time to be done. Let's move on, heal and be done. Um, so how do we create invitations to healing without forcing participation and entering that world, that trouble of forced healing?
My faith affirms that everyone has bodily autonomy and agency, which I think also includes our spiritual and mental agency and empowerment. And so I guess I have, I can think of particular places where I would like people to be able to be in a place of healing and moving on, and we just can't. We can, none of us choose someone else's healing. Everyone has to be able to make those choices on their own timeline. What I always ask myself is, like, for personally, is how can I be communicating in a way that feels healthy and in my own integrity? So I'm just always at, like, what is the action, or how can I be in relationship with this person or scenario in my own integrity, even if how I'm showing up is maybe not meeting the person yet where they are, or vice versa, but that sort of spiritual commitment to being present to the possibility of repair and healing in time. I really think that this is one of the great challenges of our time, because people are getting all kinds of messages about what healing or trauma or transformation is, online, through social media, often in ways that don't hold a lot of nuance or spiritual grounding or community and cultural support. And so we see a lot of sort of like cutting off before a potential for healing or reconciliation can happen. And so that's one that I just have to say I'm struggling with in the society that we're in right now. And so I also hope that we continue to look to, trusted long-term practices. I'm interested to hear about, Justin's perspective on this for sure. Because I really do think we're seeing a lot of pain that's going unhealed. And it sort of compounds to see that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Erin. It's this idea we have lost, in many ways, we've lost a sense of the commons, the sense of the third place. I like to think of it, when we come together intergenerationally for healing and repair and rest. I mean, historically, that has always been the space. That has always been the space for the it's been the sacred space, right? Whether it's the labyrinth or the cathedral, the church or the grove or you name it. I feel like these are the spaces, Aaron, that you're naming that in many ways we have lost. But it is the place where we go on pilgrimage together, right? There's always the individual pilgrimage, but it's the place we go together um, to get out of the mundane and into the sacred. I think of the practice of going on retreat is one of those ways that intergenerationally we can work on rest and healing is there's always the space for individual retreat, but I think some of the most powerful healing, spiritual healing that I've done in my life has always been with community on retreat, whether it's with colleagues or friends or even strangers, but um, providing that third space, providing that sacred space where it is okay to shed um, the social norms and proclivities that we use in our work and in our homes and out in the world, where really the intention and the space is just to be our hurt, broken selves and to be loved in our hurt, broken selves with other people who are in their hurt, broken selves. And somehow, in acknowledgement of that brokenness together, we find that healing. And I really think that that's something we've lost and we need to reclaim.
To loop us back, actually, as I was listening, I thought about a time recently. I'm not a dancer. That is not a very common healing spring for me to be diving into. And often it's because of like past hurts, past traumas, past walls that were built. And uh, I had a chance with the community recently to go out dancing, and I actually ended up doing it, and it was a real healing moment. But yeah, that healing in community, true healing can't be forced. Like true, if you're trying to force that healing, it's only going to cause more pain, more hurt, and it's just going to cause the repeating cycles. And I think yeah, having communal third spaces, having community that you can rely on, having a congregation that you can go to, having practices for the repair that might need to happen in a complicated situation, the ability to really listen and hear each other. This is some beautiful healing work that we've been talking about today. So I'm going to invite us for our final word. What is a small way that you'd offer for someone listening to help find a way into their own healing springs this week? I think I've heard my own call in this conversation to channel some own rest in my own life. So I would invite listeners to find your rest. There's my short invitation. But from the two of you, would love to hear what comes to mind with that question.
Well, for me, a theology that is the center of kind of all the light and life for me comes from Black liberation theologian Howard Thurman. He wrote, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive and go do it, because what the world needs is people who have come alive. And I believe he was probably speaking to predominantly Black community with that, which I want to recognize may be a little different. I do think for me as a white person, we do need to be asking what the world needs of us and what we need to be doing. And I believe that message to look for what makes you come alive transcends all manner of identity. Every single one of us, I do think the world would be a better place if we heard our deepest voice about something that brings us true joy. Because I think that light, that life, that liveliness, that aliveness, I can't imagine a person wanting to do harm to others from a place of such deep, grounded joy and aliveness. So I guess my invitation would be to folks. I didn't start dancing until my late 30s. I didn't start leading a rock band until my early 40s. My invitation to folks would be it is not too late, however small or large, to listen to that voice that Dr. Thurman talks about and do something something to answer that spark of aliveness that is just for you, and then share it with your community, share it with the world as an invitation to others as well.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And I love that idea of invitation, right? I think what I'd invite people into, and this can have two parts, one's active and one's passive. Well, maybe not passive, but it is certainly more contemplative, is I invite people to find 5 minutes, which sounds easy, but sometimes it can be a challenge, to find 5 minutes and gather a food or beverage that is a guilty pleasure, and to sit and instead of gobbling it up, take 5 minutes to smell it, to touch it, to listen to it, its texture, its sound, to taste it, and to examine it. And in that process, savor the multi-dimensional construct of what it is and why it brings joy. And just for 5 minutes, deeply, deeply and intentionally enjoy this guilty pleasure, and let it nourish body, mind, and spirit. Uh, the second piece, if people aren't feeling so contemplative in that, is, and Erin, you inspired this, is find your guilty pleasure song. For me, it would be Don't Stop Believin' by Journey. And, wherever you are, it could be in a private space, it could be a public space, it could be out it could be out on the street, it could be in the backyard, it could be in the bedroom, and just turn it up as loud as you can and just move. It doesn't matter if it's ridiculous. It doesn't matter if it's twerking. It doesn't matter if it's just, a head banging, whatever it is. Move for the duration of the song as you are able, and just let it permeate into, again, our being. And after the song is done, shake it out and go on with your day.
I love that. I'm going to do it now. Like, you can maybe see the
Oh,
poncho. Can you see it?
yeah. Oh, see, it's beautiful.
Shake it out now. Don't wait. Thank you, Justin, for that invitation. I needed that.
Oh, what a joy this conversation has been with the both of you. Thank you both for coming on and being with us today.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation and the work that you do. I feel like I've been to the healing waters now.
Yes. Okay. So folks, our listeners, we hope you found a space at the Healing Waters today too. And we are available on all of the podcast streaming platforms as well as YouTube. You can follow us on Instagram at Just Breathe Pod, and that's with 2 U's, Juiced Breathe Pod, and spread the word. If you have gotten to the end of this and Unitarian Universalism is new to you, make sure to head over to uua.org to learn a little bit more about Unitarian Universalism. And we are excited to continue this exploration of the community building map of deeper joy, with our final episode coming up next being about the canyons of deeper sharing.
Mystery, mystery, life is real and mystery.